Gentlemen, Chad. Hey,
Chad, cow, how's it going?
Chad, cow. The cow and the Chads have arrived.
what's
The
up,
three
guys?
C's.
Sees.
Good to hear from
Nothing
you.
much. Just was enjoying those cozy vibes of the intro music.
Yeah, that was
Made me feel like it's like Christmas coming up or something.
the nostalgic one. I have a sultry face on, playing the piano over here.
It's just performing live.
Yeah,
That'd be a fake
with
out.
small candelabra. It's a moonlit night, and
I think Chad should Chad should open these up with some live performance one of these days.
Maybe one of these days.
yeah, we haven't been on in like 2 weeks or anything like that. I don't want to like crowd like do these when there's like nothing to I don't want to just do this for the sake of doing them, which is why like maybe sometimes we just don't do them or we're busy or whatever, or Chad's gonna wipe stuff off his jacket or whatnot. So we can't do them every single week, but I want to keep doing these as often as we possibly can, but not too often. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like we need to just keep a good cadence of just like like try and do every week if there's something to do, and then if there's not, then we don't do it. I think we've like done a pretty good job of that. I mean, how we got like 56. This is the 57th one of these weekly Friday spaces in the past like year and probably. So I think we've done actually a pretty good job of like sticking to it, honestly.
Yeah, I also think like just depending on market conditions and like how excited people are, like I'm sure like even if there were no updates, but if there were just new people every week and when we're in that like bull market mode and everyone's paying attention, then weekly definitely will still make sense just because we can go over basics and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. Getting new people up on stage, I feel like or just getting people to come on your podcast or Twitter Spaces or whatever is just such a pain, dude.
Yeah, but even just audience. Like
Yeah.
remember when it's bull times and crypto Twitter is blowing up? I mean, me and you would sit on spaces for like 6 hours sometimes just answering like
Yeah.
just what is THORChain? Which is great, obviously, to get the word out, but those times will return.
It's true. They'll be back. They'll be back. But we won't need to answer the LP questions anymore because it'll just be savers, and that's just a lot simpler, which is good.
I know. Think of all the hours saved explaining impermanent loss protection.
Oh man, I definitely don't want to think about that one.
Now you guys have to explain lending.
Oh yeah, that'll be a lot easier.
Even just like I was tweeting with somebody and like it's like come in with a certain kind of assumption or a certain way of thinking, and like, oh, you can't do that because this would happen, and it's like, well, no, you have to like reset your assumptions.
So what's the latest on lending? Any updates? It's on stage now, right? Is it in testing? Where are we at?
It's not much has happened in the last couple of weeks, to be honest, just because we wrote some docs for some people to review externally to the project, and with the things happening on mainnet the last couple of weeks, we were kind of distracted with more important things, I guess. But at this point, it's still just more testing, validation, documentation, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, as far as I know, I asked Ursa for an update on that. They were working on some more of that like regression test framework for the lending side. There's still a bunch of things that need to go in, I believe, to make it happen. So I think there's still quite a bit of work to be done on the testing front and like the testing apparatus around the around lending. So there's still a lot more to happen on that front before like the real testing can go underway. I think there was a couple small bugs where things just weren't functioning as intended. So I think the testing framework needs to be done first, and then we can actually start getting into like the real like test with live funds. Like everyone can go on and do like a Thor Games type thing where people can just publicly test and submit bounties, just like make sure that things work as intended. And at that point, it'll probably be pretty close to the launch. But like right now, there's still some more that needs to happen on the testing and validation side. So it seems. So yeah, Chad, you should get on that.
Well, to be honest, my role is to help architect the thing and write the code that does it. And at that point, once all that's done, which it mostly is, unless there's some bugs or something to be fixed, is to hand it off to the 9realms team to do the testing and validation and get it pushed on the mainnet. So my role in it has already been served for the most part, but of course I'm around for help and advisement and fixing issues that come up.
All right, cool. So yeah, that's just kind of in progress. Keep updated on the status of those things and when it'll be like. I mean, obviously you can take out a loan. I don't know if you can actually close one at this point on StageNet. I think
you can
there's
do
still
both.
some more things. You can do both right now.
Yep,
We've successfully done it.
yes, we have.
Sweet. I know we opened one. I wasn't sure if we closed it out successfully or not.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we've done that. I tested it out. Works pretty well. A couple bugs we discovered, but nothing like too crazy. Easy to fix.
Cool. Anything you want to say, Chad, about the mainnet halt earlier this week, or I think it was late last week actually?
Yeah, I mean, I can go over what happened more or less. So it was a different one in many respects, and so we first initially received somebody submitted a white hat bounty report to us and made some claims about official signatures and this kind of stuff. And we started to engage them in conversation and that kind of stuff to figure out what they were saying and but they weren't initially they weren't really giving us much info or details, and so it was hard to validate their position or whatever. And then it turned out that from my understanding, it turned out that what they were proposing was actually already made public like a couple hours earlier. Like they were just like, it seemed like they were just like claiming the work for somebody else's work as their own and trying to collect on it or something like this. And so I think what ended up happening was that there was a research firm, and I think it was what was the name of that firm? Oh, blanking on it right now. This is gonna annoy me. God damn it.
Sorry, we can go without the names for now.
Yeah. Well, there was a research firm that posted some like findings about TSS in general, and specifically around the Binance library called TSS Lib, which we import and utilize that library that Binance created years ago and had it audited and all this kind of stuff. And so they had found a few like 3 or 4 different problems with the implementation of TSS. And so after analysis of looking at like what an attacker would need to do in order to utilize the things, we kind of established that you have to first be an active validator of the network. Second, you have to kind of manipulate the key gen in a way. You have to do that first. And then once you've done that, then there's a way that you can participate in the key signing and be able to extract the key of TSS in that process. And so since it requires the key gen first before you can do anything, and all the funds are still there now, which means if somebody did a bad key sign or manipulated the key gen already, then they would have already stolen all the funds and everything would have done by now anyway. So we figured it was safe to continue to do trading and that kind of stuff, and was adding liquidity withdrawals, all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to pause churning and get those bugs or problems sorted on the Binance library itself. before we allow churning to continue. So it'll probably take a while for us to vet all those changes being made, make sure they're all legit, but make sure the changes are good and solid, good new issues. And we are in that process now. To be honest, it'll probably take a while. I'm going to guess maybe 2 weeks to go through that process of trying to validate all the changes and make sure everything's good and safe and so forth and so on. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and keep on trading and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so this only affects the churn and whether we can churn or not. So this will be basically just a delay of the churn until this is patched and we get a new release out with the patch that'll fix any issues that are determined to be valid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, also word just to call out, like that has no effect on your average user, your average swapper, your saver. Like everything's moving along normally. That really would only matter to you if you're tuned into the nitty gritty details or you're a node operator. But for day-to-day THORChain use, I mean, as usual, really.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think people just like freak out sometimes, especially when stuff's like posted on Twitter, and then something like CoinDesk picks it up, and then people start talking about it, but in reality there's no real didn't really publish because when security disclosure is made, things are obviously need to be kept like pretty quiet while things are being investigated. So but there's obviously just like a lot of FUD that goes around and that, but yeah, it's like kind of crazy how like the rumor storm like kind of just picks up like as like something like this happens. It's just based off of like regular white hat security apparatus type stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And also just shout out to THORSec and all the devs involved in looking at this because it felt very well handled. I mean, how long was the chain even paused? Like maybe 12 hours or so? I mean, it felt like a very the freaking SWAT team came in, checked everything, said we're all good and we're back. Like it felt really well handled. So props to everyone involved.
Chad, I'm curious to see how you feel about comparison. Like obviously, I'm sure you've seen well, obviously the Avalanche, like Damon's going down, like that chain going into consensus failure. Like this happens to Solana every once in a while, but THORChain is like a different beast and like something completely different. So I'm wondering if you have like thoughts about like how you mentally distinguish things that happen on like L1 chains versus what's happening on something like THORChain, or like whether you see that any differently at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of halting, right? And different reasons why a system would halt. Like Solana halts for a few different reasons. Sometimes it's just because of there's like too many transactions. I guess that's what it was initially. And that's other reasons so in Solana's case, the way they do like their fee model is a little bit kind of broken. Kind of acknowledge it now, and they're trying to fix it, which takes a long time. And so that just through like a high enough throughput would cause it to basically halt, in a matter of speaking. And then all the validators would restart their systems to like kind of like kickstart it back online or something like this. But consensus failures is like a little bit different. So consensus failure will happen when two different nodes disagree on the end state of a particular block. They process the same input, the same data, the same transactions, and the hash of the output is like slightly different for some reason or cause. And that's usually because of most commonly just because of some sort of bug in the code, right? Some sort of indeterminate state that's happening in the code base in one form or another, and that can manifest in a whole bunch of different ways. Maybe an easy example to kind of verbalize an example that most people can understand is that, like, say you wanted to include in the block the current time, right? It is now 12:17 and 37 seconds and 0.008 milliseconds or nanoseconds, whatever it is. And so depending on the time that each individual validator runs their code, they could get a slightly different time, and when they include that into the block, the checksum of that block will be slightly different than another block. And so that's a very simple example. That's why you don't include like the time in it. It has to be very consistent, like deterministic data. And time is not really deterministic because it depends on when you execute the code, which can be different from somebody else, which causes that consensus failure. So that's just like a very, very simple example. And there's much more complicated examples I could get into, but that's probably going to be a little bit of most people in the audience. But yeah, I mean, this is a natural thing to happen when you have a young code base or a code base that's being modified heavily. That can happen anytime you're making a small code change. It can even happen. So these things tend to go away over time as the code basically becomes more solidified. more ossified. You're not really making changes anymore. You're not really, fixing bugs anymore because most of them have already been fixed. And so as time goes on, the number of code changes goes down over time, and then the statistical odds of hitting a test failure or a chain halt goes down. For us, we're a little bit different though, because than every other blockchain out there, because we can halt for a lot of reasons. Sometimes those things aren't even because of THORChain itself. We can halt because of something externally to us, right? Like both the UTXO chains recently, not because of some bug in THORChain or some code issue on our part as a project, but it was some bug or issue on somebody else's part and on their code base, right? Even this halt we just had this past week was not because of some code change on our side. It was just because of some bug on an import that we were pulled in from somebody else. In this case, it was a Binance library. So they can happen for a lot of different reasons, but for us, we're more exposed to being to halting the chain than any other project, I would argue, just because we import a lot of things. We have a relationship to a lot of different code bases externally to us, like Bitcoin and Litecoin, and maybe even like IBC one day, or like it could be lots of different things. I don't really consider this to be a problem personally, just because this is the way the game has to be played in order to do this cross-chain thing we're trying to accomplish. But it's definitely an interesting topic, a rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that people like whenever something gets paused or stopped, there's inevitably people that come out and say like, oh, like decentralization, this chain is very centralized, like these guys could just stop it whenever they want, or there's some team that's like controlling everything that's going on here, and so therefore this thing is not decentralized. So it's like it's just a interesting viewpoint, and likely one that doesn't really understand like just THORChain as a whole. So that it's probably just a misinformed opinion, which is like, I mean, that's okay, it's acceptable, I guess. But yeah, it's just interesting that people always jump to that whenever there's some kind of security thing, because it's like I guess maybe it's the people really value immutability, and like maybe people are just like very used to the very slow moving slow moving, more ossified chains that don't have these or like do very little. Like Bitcoin does very little. You can send the UTXOs, you can send your Bitcoin to somebody else, and like great, that's good. You can just send it, and that's a good time. Let me add Paul up here as well, Mr. Paul Pui from Edge Wallet. What's up, man?
So it's actually a little bit different than that. So one thing I want people to understand is that like the idea of the Mimir admin, which has been in the code base since the beginning, is primarily there to be like a fast response to some sort of issue that's going on, to be able to mitigate any kind of risk to the network or to the funds or anything like this. But it's not the final say, right? The nodes in the end have control over what actually happens. So say Kao is a Mimir admin, for example, and Kao says, I'm just going to be an asshole and just like pause trading, on the network for some reason, just to be a dick or be malicious. That doesn't mean that the whole thing is done for at that point, because the validators themselves, the nodes themselves, can vote and say, no, I want to continue trading, right? And so then once a 2/3 majority of the validators say, no, let's go ahead and continue trading, then trading not only continues, but it then actually removes the ability for Kao to use his Mimir key to be able to, pause trading again. Like actually like takes that particular man to configuration of the network to pause trading has now been revoked from the Mimir admin's capability of even being able to do so. So not only do nodes get a final say about the configurations of the network are pausing trading or not pausing trading or whatever it is, but they also get a say of like what the Mimir admin has ability to actually do. So if the validators in the community says like, what, this configuration of pausing trading is too important, we don't want Mimir admin to be able to pause it arbitrarily according to their what they deem to be a good reason to do so. Let's go ahead and take away this ability. The nodes can literally do any Mimir change that they want. It's like actually that's the way it's designed from some sense. So but we leave it there, especially for early days when like a new feature comes out, say like lending comes out, for example, and we discover there's some sort of bug or issue. We want to be able to pause lending so people can't open or close loans, so that we can fix the bug and then resume things very quickly. Conversely, on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? If you go the other way, is that's what Terra did. Like Terra had a system where they could govern the network, but it took 2 weeks to make any kind of change to the network through a voting process on that network. So when things started to go sour on the Terra network, last year, the governance model was not fast enough to be able to address the issue before things basically went to zero, right? And that's a really big problem. So it's always been kind of the forethought that we want to be able to quickly react to any bugs, problems, exploits, whatever it is going, or something crazy happening in the industry. Maybe one of the chains, like one of the UTXO chains, have some exploit that was discovered. We want to be able to mitigate the risk there as fast as possible, so we don't give anybody, any malicious party, a headway to be able to do something maliciously. So that was just a decision that's made. The idea of removing the mirror admin entirely, that could be at some point in time. We've debated and talked internally and externally within the community many times over the last couple of years. We've held on it longer than I would have guessed at the beginning when we first launched it, like a couple of years ago when we launched multi-chain chaos in. Because it's just been so helpful to be able to, like, a tool to be able to mitigate risk or be able to pause things so that we can fix some bug or issue. It's like very, very useful in that way. But at some point in the future, most likely that'll be taken away entirely. When that is, it's just like depending upon what the community will be. For me, my own 2 cents is like, let's iron out the system. Let's fix get the main features out, like lending, for example, order books and other things possibly. Get all the features landed and solidified and baked and all that kind of stuff, and then we could start like dismantling the mirror admin and taking it out of the system entirely.
Thanks so much, Chad. Actually, that was a question I was about to ask, is how exactly does this admin key work? On the Edge side, we've definitely gotten hammered by users saying that the system is very centralized, and the gods of THORChain can arbitrarily halt trading and halt operations on the chain. I think you 90% answered my question of basically like what exactly is required in order to halt trading with these admin keys, and how can they be verified by the nodes. Probably the last 10% is on the request of any of these admin keys to actually do any type of halts. Is there anything that a node needs to do to say, yes, we will go ahead and accept that halt? Or is it by and large automatic if this key has not been revoked by the nodes on the network? Just curious how automatic that is, or if the nodes still have to acknowledge anything. I think that was a question that was posed to us by some of the users, especially during the UTXO trading. We had a couple users that were really, really, really hard on THORChain and said they would never use it again because of that entire incident, and primarily because of what they deemed as the centralization risk.
Yeah, good question. So to my knowledge, last time I looked, there's 2 admin keys that are hard coded into the code base that are utilized by basically by devs. Internally, we have conversations. We kind of debate internally, like, oh, looking at the situation, like we might see here's an example, like we might get a bug report of a potential problem or exploit on the network from from an environment like this, and then we will look at it as a team, both and THORSec together. We will analyze it, kind of try to validate its finding, its legitimacy or illegitimacy, depending upon which direction it's going. And then we'll understand what the risk is to the protocol, and then we'll kind of decide internally if this is something worth, pausing trading for, or LP withdrawals, or churning, or like what does it affect, and what are the things we need to do to mitigate risk of the network itself, or of its funds that it's securing. That will go to that process, and then we choose to halt or choose not to halt as a team in general, along with THORSec. For nodes themselves, the starting position is that you agree with whatever it is that the dev team makes. So if we just say, publicly, like we, got a report of a TSS bug, like we saw this week from Kudelsky, and we want to, pause things and make sure we patch these newly discovered things in the TSS library, blah, 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 that by default, the network and the validators agree with us. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with us. You can always just start voting in the opposite direction. Validators can start voting, saying, no, whatever the things that we changed, say it was like halt trading, for example. You can start saying vote, halt trading to be false, and then the nodes can start chiming in and voting, in either the affirmative or the, or the not, and start pushing in one direction. But if once a consensus is reached amongst the nodes, whether it be one direction or the other, that's it for mirror admin. Like it no longer has the ability to set that particular configuration unless the nodes themselves break their own consensus, right? So nodes consensus always comes first, and primarily the mirror admin can only do something when the nodes themselves do not have consensus on what to do with this particular mirror, this particular configuration.
Now, do the nodes, when they vote, is voting basically like a code change, or is this literally like an interface inside of the node software that allows us to arbitrarily say we're not going to go follow what the admin key is requesting with respect to halts?
Yeah, it's not a code change. Nodes just go onto their node, and there's a command called make the mirror, and it prompts you and says, hey, what's the key name, what's the key, and what's the value. But the key is halt trading, and the value is 0 or 1, or being true or false. And so they can just vote that whenever they want on their nodes themselves.
Got it. Okay, I think that answers most of the questions. If one pops in mind, I'll go ahead and chime in again. Thanks.
Yep.
I think also specifically about the UTXO thing that those users were concerned about. Like that was an external issue to THORChain where there was there was a postmortem published about this by Pluto, I believe. But the TLDR was that there was a reports of vulnerabilities on the other chains themselves. So it wasn't something you could just patch on our end and then restart trading and then everything's fine. It was a potential issue with the chain itself, where it was reported that there could be some kind of like reorg exploit or like something could be used to potentially drain the LP funds, which is why that trading was paused for so long, because there needed to be a fix on those individual chains need to come to their own consensus about the new rules for the chains, and then make the updates to get to where our LPs were safe. So it was the external dependency on the other chains themselves, which is why they were paused for so long. Also, just the whole investigation, behind like the validity of these claims and things like that. But if it was an internal issue to THORChain, it would have been fixed much quicker than how long it took to actually like verify and fix the issues on the other chains, because it was not something that we really had any control over.
Yeah, and just for clarity, we definitely kept a close eye on the UTXO halt, and by and large defended a lot of the decisions made by the THORChain, THORSec, the dev team. And some users just don't quite have the kind of insight that maybe we might have, and as well, even after the fact, they just get jaded. I think it's one of those, especially if you come from maybe a bit more Bitcoin-like mindset. The idea that a chain halts at all just rubs them the wrong way, no matter what you tell them, even though it's like, hey, this is completely outside of the chain. And so, we did our best. It was like pages worth of communication with some users. And so we're just, I asked this question really to try to make it more public, the fact that it is a network of nodes that at the end of the day, do have final control and say over how the network operates. And it's just a small set of users that were much louder than the rest, but definitely posed what would be legitimate concerns that the not as in the know could potentially have, and that's all.
Yeah. Conversely, if we didn't do this, right, we weren't able to actually make pauses or whatever, or we required governance to do that, we would like say, hey, we need a 2/3. We say like, hey, we found a TSS bug, whatever, in the Binance leverage reporting. There's an exploit that publicly released the information, the CEVs about this, and we want to pause trading or pause whatever terms, whatever, and then the 18 to 24, it would take a 2/3 majority of the validators to vote in the affirmative to pause things. Like by that time, you can potentially just drain all the funds, right? Or if there's an exploit that was revealed about Dogecoin or something like this or whatever, and then that exploit allowed you to drain all the Doge and Rune out of that particular pool, like the funds would be lost. And if that would happen, then like the project would be more or less dead, right? And we wouldn't be able to have anything that's essentialized across chain. So like we really have to, we can't sit in a place of idealism and be detached from the idea of like realism. Do you know what I mean? And so even if you get rid of the Mimir admin right now, to say you just were to remove it, you still have the ability that nodes themselves, individual validators themselves, can make the choice to pause the entire system and when they see fit. So we don't require that admin to be online to time. Like if there's something going on, if there's like maybe somebody has some sort of massive exploit that they're going to extract $50 million out of the pools or whatever the hell it is, and we have the delayed outbound that's delaying that transaction up to an hour. Any validator can say, hey, this looks very suspicious. This looks like there's something wrong here. I'm going to do a make pause, which allows that individual to pause the network up to 1 hour. And then a validator can say, make zoom and push the other direction if they feel that it's fine, it's not really much of an issue. We could just go ahead and continue on. Or they can also do make pause and pause it an additional one. And that allows us to be able to act quickly, but it'll not allow any single validator to pause the network indefinitely or be nothing more than just kind of a nuisance. But in the end, what's more important from my perspective is to make sure that the network and its funds are secure than inconveniencing swappers in Edge Wallet or what have you for some period of time while we try to figure out what the problem is.
I think I'm in 100% agreement. So I'm aligned. I think the idea of having these admin keys and the way they operate for the security of funds is of utmost importance. I think probably the smallest thing that could be tweaked is probably just the messaging. I know when I surf through the Discord, and probably this might be true of other users that are less knowledgeable, and you just see, we have halted or we have unhalted. The team has decided to halt, the team has decided to unhalt. It definitely can come across to an average user as, okay, there is just God here that can arbitrarily do things. And I think some aspect of the messaging, even if it's copy pasta, boilerplate, that says, one of the X number of admin keys has pushed out a request to halt, and none of the nodes have vetoed or rejected it. There hasn't been any nodes to reject it. And even if that's pasta and you hear it over and over again, it, at least for someone that joins the Discord, makes it clear that there's some level of not a single God, but that the nodes are involved in this decision by simply not overriding this admin. Something like that would definitely help, because I myself, looking at the Discord, might get that unless I came in and asked these questions in a deeper level, like here on this Spaces. So I think it's image, not the actual existence of this feature, that might be the issue that people are having. And so that would be my only little nugget that might help, with preventing some of the reaction that I think the industry is seeing.
That's an excellent suggestion, and definitely should go into future comms around these types of issues. Like, yeah, if it had just said with zero objections from node operators or something like that, then it kind of shows like, okay, like this is a decision that the nodes are still ultimately have the final say in. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think we're still definitely learning. Every single one of these is learning, and no two one of these pauses are the same. They're all like so bespoke and completely different. I think one of the changes that we'll be making going forward is having THORChain put out the announcement rather than like Noms or Chad or like somebody else. I think having THORChain do it also can go some type of distance in showing that this is like some kind of security, like it's a security related issue and not not the dev team just pausing things just to pause things. But if you guys have like specific suggestions on like how to communicate this stuff, then like we're definitely all ears. So we be more effective, and like I should be doing my part on this too, and like figuring out the best way to communicate all these things, and the best way to put the information out there without causing like unnecessary like panic and fear, but just be more effective in our communications with this type of stuff. So I'm wondering if you guys or anyone in the audience has like thoughts on this or suggestions on what they think should be going on.
Like, one thing to be aware too, like just to be conscious about, is that like at some level the community does have to trust the devs, right, and the people behind building and maintaining this protocol. Like, because if we get a notification from THORChain discovers a new bug, whatever, that allows people to steal the funds, just hypothetically speaking, we're not going to publicly to disclose that information publicly and say, hey, if you want to steal all the $100 million of value, here's how you do it. Nodes, should we pause the chain or not? Because obviously that's just going to tip and cause like the funds to get lost. In fact, we've literally seen this happen where devs had even sometimes accidentally created a branch fixing up some sort of security issue. Some malicious person is watching the repo, sees, oh, there's a new branch and it fixes the security issue, I'm going to go ahead and exploit it before they actually make the patch. I've literally seen this happen in DeFi at least 3 times now, where the devs, like really the devs' fault because they disclose the information of how to steal the funds from the network. And that just seems like it's a really, 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 really bad idea. And so at some level, like the community does need to trust the devs and say, if we are calling for a pause, if we're saying that we need to pause trading, we need to pause churning, or whatever it is, that we're doing it for us, and we believe there is a legitimate thing to be concerned about, and we will be happy to, explain it to people and show people the details and what all it is when the time is right, once the network has been is safe. Do you know what I mean? We can't do that prior to that point for obvious reasons.
Yeah, or believe that there's a potential, or pausing while an issue is being while a potentially credible issue is being investigated for its validity. Both of those reasons I think are pretty valid for issuing a pause on a particular chain.
Right.
Yeah, personally as a user, these things don't really concern me too much, but I understand it's mostly about optics and how people are less involved in THORChain. But I remember there was a rant once that Pluto went on that I vaguely remember that shifted my perspective on this, which was just that, like, we kind of expect THORChain to act like a centralized exchange in terms of it's just always perfect and everything is always exactly instant and perfect. And like the reality is that THORChain is very complex, and like it's wrangling all these other blockchains that are all doing their own thing in a different way. And the reality is like there's kind of always going to be little things that need more hands-on attention or issues or things like that. And that kind of put it into my perspective of like, okay, this is like this is a huge resource and it's very complicated. And the fact that it's not centralized is why it's going to require more intervention at times. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we say this every time, but it's not like when there's a problem going on in Binance, they don't tweet it out on the Binance Twitter that all of a sudden everything, a chain is paused on their network, or they have to do this or do that. They just do it, and they go back online in 15 minutes because they got the patch out. It's really not that big of a deal for some a centralized entity to do that, because they can just unilaterally update, pause things, do whatever they want, and that's totally fine. But things are being done out in the open here, which cause a lot more noise, which makes people very
yeah,
confused as to what's going on. So it's like improving the communication. Like, seriously, if people have ideas, just like send a DM to its account or something like that. For just like how to better communicate, especially when there's like security, like especially security things that it's like there can't be like really public information out at that time, but like there needs to be a pause, and just like, especially in like that situation, because that does come up every so often, especially as there's more and more white hat disclosures, which is a great thing, and that's just the security apparatus working as normal. But like to the outside and people that are like barely paying attention, and just see like one thing on Twitter or CoinDesk or something like that, and then it's like, oh, this shit's down again, and it sucks. So
yeah, even as situations like this unfold, people could get involved with suggestions for communications. Like, for example, you could definitely jump into the dev Discord. There's a Twitter channel, and like during these times, a bunch of people are trying to figure out what do we say, how's the best way to say it. So definitely, like even live during situations like that, people could definitely chime in and say like, hey, like I think when this announcement goes out, like let's make sure to include XYZ. All of the sort of community feedback things are definitely would be heard, like even on the fly. Like we don't have to plan it ahead or something like that. Like it's everything is kind of a live unfolding experience with these things. So definitely people should feel like they can get involved if they have something to say about how a particular communication is going to come out. Like say it.
Yeah, the other thing here too is that like it's because we are decentralization that we see these things at all. Like when most projects that are using this TSS library that Binance created, they're not actually decentralized at all, and they have trusted individuals who are running those nodes that are signing these things, generating these key gems and that kind of stuff. And so like you won't even see a pause in Nancy's in this, because there's no reason to pause it from their perspective, because they're the ones running all the nodes, right? And so a centralized exchange has problems like this all the time. It's actually quite often that we see that. And I have a friend of mine who worked at Coinbase for a good while, who kind of told me some interesting little tidbits. But like it happens all the time. But most of the time you're not even aware of it, because everything's just running as a black box on the internet somewhere, and they just patch things behind the scenes without you even being aware that there was an exploit able to begin with, right? For us, we can't really do that because we're transparent by nature. We're open by nature. Everybody has to know everything we're doing all the time. There's nothing to hide behind or covertly be able to change anything. Everything is just done in the clear, right? And so things are when we deal with issues, they're always shown, and because of that, it gives people the impression that we're more unstable than a Coins or Binance, whatever. And the reality is we're actually probably not. It's just that you don't see a majority of their issues that they're having over there, because they're just patched behind the doors and it's never exposed, in a sense. So it's just like, even this TSS library thing we just saw, like we're one of the very few projects out there that were actually exposed to it, because we actually have untrusted validators. We don't trust the validators we're running. We don't know who they are. We don't KYC them. We don't know who the individuals are, nor do I really want to know who the individuals are. And so we can't actually trust that those are non-malicious. We actually make the assumption that many of them could be. And so because with that assumption, we have to treat the network differently than how a Coinbase treats their centralized exchange.
Or even something like a BTC bridge, where there's trusted I think they're called wardens, or it's basically the equivalent of a Thor node in their eyes, where it's like Halborn and Ava Labs running the nodes for their bridge. They don't need to do anything, because they've used this trusted model of security, and that's totally fine. It's just a different way of doing things. So cool. Any other riffing you guys want to do on this whole security stuff? There's a really cool feature actually coming out in 108, which I want to talk about a little bit. It's this new outbound fee multiplier. So this is something that we've been seeing, especially on the integrations front. A lot of wallets are concerned about fees on THORChain, and like rightfully so. Like anyone that's done a swap on THORChain that ends in Ethereum, you'd probably be like, wow, this is a the gas is freaking expensive on Ethereum. So this is a new change to hopefully lower the gas fees that you pay. So for the past like year or two, you need to pay 3 times the actual gas fees on Ethereum. And we all know how expensive gas fees on Ethereum are when you just got to pay the regular gas fee. And on THORChain, you have to pay 3 times the amount of gas. And that's because we don't want the system subsidizing the gas fees in case there's a spike or whatnot. The outbound transactions need to go out on high gas. So the gas is already cranked up to 11 and it's 3 times that, which is why these outbounds are so expensive. So Eridonis, well, I believe Chad came up with the concept and then Eridonis just pushed this out. It should be in the next Thor node version whenever this goes out. And this will change that outbound fee multiplier. So right now it's 3x the gas fee. This should make it dynamic. So I believe the behavior works something like this. So the network tracks how much of a surplus it has in terms of gas fees paid versus paid by its users versus actually used on the chain, because it can't predict beforehand exactly how much it needs to put out. So you need to have some kind of multiplier on here. So what it does is it tracks how much fees are being used versus how much are being collected, and then we'll dynamically set the outbound fee. So sometimes people go overpaying gas, sometimes people underpaying gas, but on the average, it should really drop the amount that people are paying in gas, and it make it a little more variable. So like sometimes you might pay, sometimes you could pay 3x, sometimes you could pay just 1x the regular gas fee, and it just depends on how much of a surplus there is in the network. So basically, it ensures that extra fees aren't being taken from the users, but also not being subsidized by the protocol. So it seems like a really nice middle ground, and it should really drive down Ethereum outbound fees. So if you're swapping Bitcoin to Ethereum, they should make it pretty significantly cheaper, especially for smaller swap sizes where a lot is really taken out of that outbound fee. So this should be a really big change, I think, and hopefully it should see a pretty big difference in, well, first off, DEX aggregation. They should make this a lot better because now there's just a lot less that needs to be paid in fees, but just the regular swap experience. And I believe this works for every single chain, but you'll see the most effect on Ethereum just because it's so expensive. But it should really just bring down gas fees as a whole and just make swapping cheaper for the user without really having any other kind of effect.
Yeah, this is actually really good. I remember talking about this, I don't know how, it's been a year and a half ago, to help curb the swapping on the network and make it cheaper for everybody. But the whole idea of it is to make sure that the network itself isn't subsidizing people's trades for them, right? We don't want the network to become, hold the liability of everybody's trades, so that if the gas prices go up really quickly or something like this, that we don't, we don't have our left, holding, spending a bunch of extra ether to pay for the gas of that transaction, and then what would happen was more room would come out of the reserve and into the pool to kind of cover the LPs of that or savers of that pool. And so it's just there we want to make sure that users are paying for their own gas, right? And the change here is just to make sure that we'll kind of fuzzy it a bit, meaning that sometimes people will get cheaper trades now, and the people who are paying more in gas now will kind of make other people's cheaper into the future a little bit. But in the end, we're just making sure that the total amount of room that the swaps are giving the reserve to pay for gas versus how much room the reserve is using to pay for that gas are equivalent 1-to-1 rather than being up or down in a particular angle. So the 3x is just there just to ensure that the reserve is not actually getting cleaned out through swap gas fees and just being drained in that way, and so now it can be more like a 1-to-1 versus like a 1-to-3.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for this. I'm excited to see how much of a change it'll make on especially outbound Ethereum swaps, because it's clear that that's one of the weakest areas of THORChain, especially EVM, because we do things in our own bespoke way. We don't just stick to the EVM ecosystem, but the outbound fees are just kind of crazy. So hopefully this should be a good change that just sees cheaper swap fees on the whole for users, and that's just a real positive change, I think, and I think everyone can get behind that. So I would look forward to that in the next Thor node version, which should be out in the next week or two. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty hyped about this one. This should help with integrations as well, because yeah, as I was saying, one of the big concerns from potential wallets and integrators and things is just the overall fees. So we're listening to the feedback of what you could think of as Chain's customers, which is the front ends, the interfaces, and just taking that to heart and just giving them the best possible user experience. That way we can get more and more integrations. So it's constantly listening to feedback from all these interfaces and making changes as necessary, because that's what we're going to need to do to stay ahead and also have just the best UX going forward. So good change, Chad. Thank you. What we want to talk about next?
We can open it up to the community, or if Pluto wants to talk about some things, he's welcome to come on stage and talk about some things. But anybody in the community wants to ask a question, you're welcome to start asking questions, I suppose.
Paul hopped off, but thanks for coming up, Paul. Huge shout outs to Paul Pue and Edge Wallet. These guys are pretty on top of everything, and Paul's a really great guy. So thanks for coming up, Paul. Definitely check out Edge Wallet if you guys haven't. It's a pretty cool mobile wallet, and they have THORChain powered swaps and savers and everything else. What else could you possibly need?
Including THORSwap aggregator contracts now as well.
Oh, hell yeah. I didn't realize they had the whole aggregator in there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys while we're waiting for, if anyone wants to come on stage, you're welcome to come on stage, but I'll tell you an interesting story while we're waiting. So a couple of days ago, I actually met up with Sonny from Osmosis. He's like the main guys over there. We met up and grabbed like a cup of coffee and just kind of chatted about THORChain and Osmosis and potential integrations and like that kind of stuff. And it was kind of a fun conversation. We talked for I don't know, it must have been like at least 2 hours or 3 hours. We just chatted a bunch of things. We talked about lending, we talked about integrations, talked about all sorts of stuff. And so one of the things I learned from him, he understands some aspects of the Cosmos SDK that I don't. Like he's much more in tune with IBC, for example, than I am. And so we kind of talked about like the technical ways of actually implementing DEX aggregation with Osmosis in using the Atom Gaia chain, Cosmos Hub chain to kind of like in a single transaction push Atom into Osmosis and then do a swap there and then push the resulting asset on the swap to some other chain like Juno or something like this to some random specified address. And so I think we have an interesting idea. We need to validate it some and kind of took some time kind of like looking into how difficult this would be and so forth and so on. But we have an interesting way of like how to accomplish DEX aggregation with Osmosis. And it wouldn't really require much on the Osmosis side. We could do it almost entirely side. The only part we need their help with is when you deploy a CosmWasm smart contract on Osmosis, it requires governance to approve it. It's not permissionless the way that Ethereum is. But I'm quite confident that Sunny or the Osmosis community wouldn't push against us using their DEX for swaps. I'm sure they want to see their trade volume increase just as much as we do. So I think that's something we're going to be taking a look at some point. It's obviously being balanced with a bunch of other work. Other integrations happen, chain clients, wallets, lending. Like there's lots of things that the team is working on. So I'm not really sure where it lands in the priority order or when that's going to actually happen. But it kind of gives new insight of how we can accomplish using Osmosis and DEX aggregation, and then be able to connect to all the chains and all of the assets in the Cosmos universe.
Wait,
Amazing.
so it is possible with just Atom, or would require Osmo?
I think it is possible. I think that it is. We still need to validate it and do some more deeper research, but it sounds like it is possible. The reason why it is because this is how I imagine it would work, is that when Bifrost signs an Atom transaction, right now it just does a transfer from this Atom address to that Atom address, right? But I think that the theory is that we can, instead of doing a transfer, we can do an IBC transfer and do an IBC transfer from Bifrost to a CosmWasm smart contract that we write and deploy onto the Osmosis chain. Which in that IBC transfer, there's also like a little like field for data, right? Or for like a memo, like we use memos right now, embed like a little bit of a memo in there. And so we do an IBC transfer to the CosmWasm smart contract with a memo that gives the details of like, oh, this is the asset we want, this is what we're swapping to, this is the asset the chain or the address that we're trying to send it to, blah, 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 like all the information we need to kind of pass to our own smart contract on Osmosis. Then the Osmosis contract receives the IBC transfer, reads the input, memo information or metadata information, does a swap of and transaction from Atom to Juno, let's just say, and then once the transaction is done, the swap is done, it then does an IBC transfer from the Osmosis chain to the Juno chain, which gets sent to the address that we're trying to send to it in the end. And conversely, the same thing can happen where you can go the other direction and do an IBC transfer from Juno with the Juno token to the smart contract on Osmosis with a, like, the metadata and information, put into the field. It does the swap to Atom. The Atom gets transferred to the to IBC transferred to the Bifrost address, our Atom address on that chain, and then we observe that transaction, swap the Atom to BDC or whatever the other thing is, or the other smart contract on Ethereum for text segregation on the other side. And now you can have like 3 different or 4 DEXs being integrated in a single transaction. That makes sense. It's quite technical, but hopefully that's not too hard to follow.
Yeah,
totally. I'm also wondering whether it makes sense to do it through Atom or to, I mean, there's a couple different possibilities. Like, you can do this through Atom, do aggregation through there. Like you were just saying, you could get rid of Atom and do a direct osmosis integration, and then just kind of do it through that. I think there's a couple different ways that you could do it, and like I think this will take some stewing upon and some more research. But it's super. I mean, I think we should definitely aggregate no matter what, but we need to figure out like their strategy on like which way.
Right. And Sunny and I had a conversation about the idea of adding the Osmosis chain client to THORChain directly. And we kind of played around with the idea. We talked about the idea of like doing a token swap between our treasury and their treasury to kind of help seed the pool with some funds, some Osmo and some Rune. But if we want to get this done, probably the fastest and easiest way, I'm assuming this, we still need to do research and that kind of stuff, but probably the fastest and easiest way of doing it is just doing it through the Atom chain, just because it's already integrated and we just got to write a smart contract, deploy it, and then maybe make a modification of Bifrost possibly. But if we want to do the Osmosis chain integration, that would require more governance. That would require debates within the community about what's the next chain client we're going to add. Is it going to be Osmosis? Is it going to be Binance Smart Chain? Is it going to be Polygon? Like, that's going to be a big debate onto its own. And so like probably the least controversial or the least friction would be just like integrating it now through the Atom chain. And then the other question becomes like, well, which one of these pools would be deeper? Like, that's what we really care about as a project most, is like the Atom pool that's going to be deeper, or is it going to be the Osmo pool that's going to be deeper? Like, which one of these two things is going to generate a more deep pool? That's probably the clearest answer we could probably get, whatever the answer is.
Yeah, just arriving to that answer seems like there's no clear answer on like, if we did osmosis, would there be more liquidity there? It's a strange situation, because especially when you're talking about Cosmos chains and being, I don't want to say like controlled by one team or anything like that, but just a relatively like small validator set, their own tokenomics and things like that. Like, all these factors come in, like that all factors into how well the actual LPs perform and probably likely how much liquidity eventually gets into that pool. So just like so many factors to consider with it. I also agree that it's probably it is cleanest to, or at least to start, to do it through Atom, and then if we determine that it's better to go through Osmosis, then we could do some kind of process to do that. But yeah, I think for sure starting with Atom and doing that. And if anyone here's a Cosmos dev wants to try and take a crack at this, then you should definitely get in touch, and we can get started on this sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just excited it's possible one way or another. I mean, I just want to see the outcome, which is any IBC asset to any THORChain supported asset or aggregator supported asset. I mean, that's just huge. I think that's what most people want to see, rather than LPing or even savers for these assets, just because Atom, you already have regular staking, and Osmo, I believe they have some kind of single asset staking, I assume, or LPing, but it's really about the anything to anything swap. So, but
but therein lies the problem, because you need that liquidity.
I know which one is actually going to, like, seems a bit unanswerable. I mean, I could throw a dart and say a guess, but I don't know.
Well, I mean more just from the perspective of like, all right, so these chains already have their own like native yield, you can call it, and if our Sabres product or our LP product is like has a yield that's below just like the basically the safe rate of that chain, right? Then how is liquidity incentivized to come into the THORChain pools and then make swaps happen? Because if there's, if we're trying to continue to aggregate liquidity with only, 1.5 million in the Atom pool, like, you're just not going to get anywhere with it. Cause you can make probably like a small swap and that's it. And then maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't really care that much about it, but like, we want to be putting through as much size as we possibly can, right? So we need deep pools for that, and which also means that we need to be thinking about things like their own inflation rate and like I mean, not inflation rate. I mean, like their own like native yield and like how much we have in our savers. It's like, are we actually pulling in liquidity versus are we just doing this connection just to put through like 5 swaps a week that are $500?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of chicken or the egg though too, right? Because like if their liquidity is there and the swaps are good, then people are going to swap more, which creates more yield. And like, but yeah, you have to kind of get it out of that like initial like limbo period of there not being enough liquidity, therefore nobody does swaps. So yeah.
Yeah, part of it I think is just like trying to get the UIs on the osmosis side of the world to integrate with THORChain themselves as well to create trade and that kind of stuff. Like be part of that process.
That would be incredible. I wonder if you guys might have talked about that at all.
We did, and I'll be blunt with you. So there are several UIs around the Osmosis exchange. The primary one, to my knowledge, is the app.just.zone, which is the one that Sonny and his team has put together. And we talked about integrating in that way, and it seemed like he was a little on the head side. And his reasoning, to be honest, I didn't quite understand something about like they want to have a kind of a centralized exchange experience in their UI, and it wouldn't make sense for us. I don't really understand, but maybe it would for like WBDC to BDC trades or something like this. I don't really fully understand it. I'm sure what he's saying makes sense. Sonny's a smart guy and all, but it might require a little bit more discussion and deep dive into that. I didn't want to get too deep into that part at this point. This part I want to see how we actually get integrated at all, let alone how do we
Yeah.
get level 2 integrations of getting more UIs and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. Start there. I'm guessing his thoughts are kind of around like when you're only dealing with IBC assets and you're only dealing with one chain, essentially, like it does make the experience easy in the sense that you can just do everything within that one little world. Obviously, that's very different than the THORChain thesis, which is like you're actually connecting the incompatible worlds, right? But I think something that I hope to see a lot more, that we've kind of talked about this concept a lot, but like the settle to option, like maybe in something like an Osmosis, you're dealing with like all these various like other forms of Bitcoin or wrap Bitcoin or some IBC, XLR Bitcoin, whatever is being used there. But and you're doing trading in that regard, but then there's still like a settle to native option where you can like extract from that system and settle to native Bitcoin, and that would of course be using THORChain. That's
Right.
a concept that I feel like will hopefully become more popular.
Yeah, I mean, if the app.zone doesn't want to do it, then there's like a few other ones too we can talk to and try to give them a little nudge in the right direction of integrating with us and getting more and kind of and it makes sense for them to do it as well. They want to be able to settle to the layer 1. That seems like a fairly obvious and valuable thing to do, right? So I can't find there be a lot of resistance. But I would say though, like if anybody wants to help with this, we don't really have anybody on our dev team that's a Cosm Wasm expert because we don't really deal in that world ourselves. If anybody knows somebody who is a Cosm Wasm expert or is interested in like kind of contributing to the project, of course it would be compensated. And help us kind of write the code for the smart contract part of this thing, that'd be interesting. Reach out to probably to Nine Realms is probably the best people to reach out to because they're the ones that probably be heading that work and that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you know anybody who's interested in helping out and this thing, like reach out to Nine Realms and for your services.
Yeah, just send a DM to this Twitter handle, and we'll take care of you. Yeah, any Cosm Wasm dev that wants to take on something like this, yeah, I think we know some people we're gonna reach out to, but yeah, obviously, if there's people from the community that want to step up and do it, then like now's the time to get involved and go for it. So yeah, I guess one last thing I wanted to talk about was THORSwap's SwapKit SDK.
Yeah, man.
Like we got a cool demo on it yesterday from their team, and I mean it looks absolutely sick. I don't know if you want to talk about it at all, Chad. It's pretty phenomenal. If you want to talk about like kind of its capabilities and what it can do and like what it means for the broader space who can utilize it, that kind of stuff.
For sure, yeah, I'll talk a bit on it. I think we'll have full announcements and like documentation and everything coming out like any day now. So there'll be some more, but just as a broad overview, yeah, basically SwapKit is the new name from THORSwap for just the all-encompassing integration package. So, for a long time, we've kind of been like just calling this the THORSwap API or Pathfinder API, but it's like a lot more than just an API. So THORSwap kind of has 2 products at this point, one being the front end that we all know, of course, and then the other now being called SwapKit, which is actually how you get all the functionality of THORSwap into your Dex, wallet, app, whatever, right? So you're getting like the API, like finding you the best route, tokenless services, so you don't have to build out all of that on your own. Transaction tracker is going through a huge update, so that's really exciting. Should be live on THORSwap itself as a demo pretty dang soon. You've already got to test it out, right?
Yeah, I tried it out. It's so sick. Yeah, it's basically a new transaction tracker. So like, I'm sure everyone here hates actually like me, hates sending their coins into the void and having no idea what happens to them for like anywhere from 10 seconds to an hour, and you're just waiting and you have no idea what the heck's going on. This is a really slick UI that track for you. It basically keeps you updated on like what's happening. All right, right now the Bitcoin is being sent. It's waiting for confirmation. You wait for that, and then once it gets confirmed, it like checks it off, and then it says, all right, now that Bitcoin is being swapped to Rune. All right, done. 3 seconds, and then it's like, all right, now that Rune's going to Ethereum, that's going out. All right, now outbound, like 5 minutes, and then it's done. Then it has a link to all the Block Explorer transactions on the bottom. You can see it end to end. It's like it's a pretty nice piece of equipment there, and something that's going to be like really useful for not just THORSwap, but just like the ecosystem in general, because I think that's kind of one of the weakest points of the swap experience right now is just not knowing what the hell is happening after you execute. It's like THORChain is really good at executing the swap, but then it's not so good at the front. There we just don't have this yet, and now we do, but we didn't have the tools to really just keep the user notified on like what is the current status, like what is going on right now. And I think the THORSwap, this swap kit thing will go a long way in helping that.
Yeah, this transaction tracker, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's just been long overdue. It's like definitely been one of the weakest points as far as UI in the broader THORChain ecosystem. Like you just see a spinning wheel and you don't really know what's going on. But like you said, like now honestly, the biggest feature of all of it is just where you currently have seen the spinning wheel, you'll just see a total countdown. So it's just estimating the total of all the legs involved in your swap, including outbound delays. If it's using aggregation, like all the various steps, it's just giving you a total estimated countdown. And then, yeah, you can click in and expand it and see like, oh, your Bitcoin is on its way into the THORChain vault. And that has a countdown. And then it's like, okay, now it's being swapped to ETH. And now it's going to Kyber swap to get to your final ERC20 or AVAX token or whatever it is that you're doing. So yeah, a lot more transparency and just giving you like that it's really just reassurance that everything is actually going along smoothly versus you just click submit and you're like, okay, I just, sent my coins and I don't know, I don't have like confirmation of exactly what's going down until, oh, okay, it showed up. Great. So that'll be great. And like you were touching on, the real value is that, yeah, this is part of the swap kit package. So we're going to be seeing like a lot of UIs that we're already familiar with in the THORChain ecosystem that could potentially be using this, as well as like all the new integrations and partners that we're working on will have access to this. And that doesn't mean like, oh, it's like an external link to this new transaction tracker. Rather, they can like build in these endpoints into their UIs and just like call on all of the data that this tracker is utilizing and package it in their own interface. So that's like an existing wallet or whatever else will still have access to this, which is huge for the space.
Yeah, the analogy that I have in my brain for this is it's kind of like the package tracker. Like you place something on an order on Amazon, it kind of walks through we placed your order, we're waiting for it to be okay, the payment went through, we're waiting for it to be packaged. Thing was mailed, it's now in Sacramento, and then it got updated. Okay, now it's in Wyoming or whatever it is, and you can like watch the progress of your package being sent to you. It's conceptually similar to that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's just one of the kind of aspects of this whole swap kit, which is hence the name of like, it's really this like package of really the goal is to how do we make it as simple as possible for partners to get this whole thing, to get the THORChain swaps, to get everything integrated for multi-chain wallets, to get the aggregator contracts in there, really just minimizing every step possible that they'll have to do and just get it as much integrated into the swap kit package just to make integrations really simple. So like they also get like a partner dashboard so they can track everything that's going on with their integration. They of course get like all the aggregator contracts and any ongoing contracts. So for example, like if we got the IBC aggregation and THORSwap's doing that, that's something that would just be like added into the whole suite over time, or Binance Smart Chain aggregation. So partners will really just be able to like, hopefully at least the vision is just like, it's a lot more set it and forget it. They don't have to worry about like the complexities of integrating as much. I mean, obviously there's still a few little things and Oleg or Mogarky, someone from the THORSwap team, can of course like walk partners through what exactly they do have to do. But really, the vision and the goal is just to make it as like easy as possible to integrate like everything that you see that's on THORSwap is essentially a demo for what SwapKit can do in an external integration. So really exciting.
Yeah, one of the things, like going back to the integration stuff, there's so many apps that are just tool and they just don't have the tools to construct like Bitcoin transactions and things like that. And it's quite tough to get them to see the value in switching over their entire infrastructure to being able to construct a Bitcoin transaction, or like a wallet to be able to support native Bitcoin and send transactions like that. But obviously, like, from our perspective, and everyone here can probably see this, is that it's a hugely valuable tool, being able to be multi-chain and use our infrastructure to swap between chains. So one of the big advantages of SwapKit, I think, not just being able to do the swap API stuff, but actual like wallet integrations, because it makes the wallet integration process easier. Where, say you're an EVM app right now, you can use this SwapKit and you can have a full Bitcoin ledger integration done in a couple hours, and you can start constructing ledger based swaps, and you can go. It's basically the portal to your on ramp. So you could have, say you're a Doge only wallet or something like that, and you want to onboard your wallet. How do you do that? Like, where are you getting users? So you have to get users from centralized exchanges and withdraw. But what if you could have a crypto native on ramp? So all of a sudden you can use this SDK, and you could say, all right, well, you have a MetaMask wallet. Okay, great. We don't need to know anything about this. We're just going to implement this THORSwap SwapKit SDK. And all of a sudden, we have a MetaMask integration, we have an XDeFi integration, we have a ledger integration. Onboard your Bitcoin from here. You can onboard your Ethereum from here. You can onboard your Litecoin. Like anything that's THORChain supported will be very easy to implement, because the teams don't have to go through and figure out, all right, now how do we, which wallets are we going to implement? Are we going to implement XDeFi wallet? Are we just going to do a key store? Are we just going to do a ledger? Like, if I was if I was like someone thinking about one of these integrations, I'd be like, wow, that sounds like so much work. I don't want to do any of that. We're just going to keep doing our EVM stuff because it's working. But it's an easy SDK to say, hey, we can all of a sudden have Bitcoin liquidity come in through here into our app and have a crypto native on and off ramp. To me, that seems kind of like a no brainer, like given that it just becomes so much easier with the SwapKit. So I think that's really where a lot of the value of this thing lies.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're basically skipping. You're getting 3 years of THORSwap box to plug into your wallet, basically.
Cool. So yeah, I'm just like, whenever we're meeting with the new wallets and things right now, so I'm on the top of my mind thinking about the SwapKit and just how they could be utilizing it. So exciting thing. If anyone's doing development on THORChain, definitely check out the SwapKit. I believe the URL is swapkit.dev. You can go and check out the whole thing right there. Just go to swapkit.dev in the URL.
Yeah. And again, we'll have like a lot. There'll be like a proper announcement coming out any day, like really going through everything and demos and all that kind of thing. So this is kind of just your first little teaser, but people have known this is going on. But like I said, this is just like a way of fully encompassing like everything into really like its own product and its own thing that's like part of THORSwap. But like we've been saying for a while, like this has kind of been like it's become like the North Star of THORSwap, like more than THORSwap itself is like the actual integrations, right? And like what we're all aligned on from THORChain, Nine Realms, THORSwap is really landing these integrations. So that's been the main focus, and now it's just kind of becoming official here with SwapKit.
Last call if anyone from the audience wants to come up, ask questions, comments, just anything really. These are always open, so anyone can come up at any time, but no one has decided to come up this week. So yeah, anything else on the top of your minds, Chad?
No, on my end, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm psyched about right now is SwapKit, and especially this transaction tracker. So hopefully that's live on THORSwap within the next, I don't know if I should put a timeline, but it's very, very, very close. So everyone should be able to be playing with that new transaction tracker really soon. And oh, my bad for the muting. I think I bumped that by mistake a minute ago. I didn't realize if I thought you could just unmute yourself. My bad. I thought I just oops. But yeah. That'll be out really, really soon, so people can start seeing that transaction tracker we're talking about.
Chad, you should be unmuted now. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say that I'm like really happy with the forward movement that we've seen on the project in the last few months, and the swap kit is like another good example of something even externally to the like core development is just like really good, powerful tools being created that just extend the capabilities and ease of use and UX and experience of using this DEX and this exchange is like pretty spectacular. Like it's I'm honestly I'm really impressed with the work that people in the project, both in on the core project and externally. It's just blows the mind.
Cool. Oh, I had one more thing I wanted to say, and I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, I was gonna. Today's the last day of the first quarter of the year. So I think right now I'm working on just a Q1 kind of update article, just going through the Q1 stats, all the major stats that we look at as Nine Realms. Like we have a bunch of indicators that we're always checking for, like the health of the network and things like top affiliates and how much liquidity fees are being generated and how much block rewards are coming in versus liquidity fees. Like that's all stuff that we want to publish and get out there. And I feel like a quarterly cadence is like kind of right where it's not harsh, but it's not too often either. I think monthly might be a little bit too much in terms of like core protocol development, but we'll be putting out a Q1 update probably the end of next week or so, being today's the last day of the first. So I would look forward to that next week and just basically just going through all the stuff that happened in Q1, which is just like just a bunch of new things that have come up in Q1, and just pointing towards the stuff that's coming, which is BSC and lending, obviously like the two biggest things on the horizon. So it doesn't look like anyone wants to come up on stage. So that's pretty much it on my end.
I guess we can call it. Unless Thor, you got anything left you want to bring up?
No, I don't think so. Just I listened to your Archeo live yesterday. So that was pretty cool. Anything you want to say about that, or?
Yeah, I guess I could. I've been purposely holding off on like at some point I want to write like a real tweet thread about the project and what my involvement is and that kind of stuff. And I've been holding off on that until we're further down the path. But for anybody who doesn't know, like I've been working on another project called Archeo along with the Shapeshift team. And the goal of this thing is to do what I consider like this. I'm kind of coining a new phrase, but what I call post protocol centralization, right? And so the idea of that is that any DeFi application, whether it be THORSwap or THORChain or Aave Compound, you name it, they're only decentralized on the protocol level. They're not actually interacting with the protocol and the websites and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is like highly centralized and requires Web2 infrastructure to interact with, which to me is like inherently a problem, right? If we want Web3 to be successful, we can't really get bullish on Web3, but then be reliant on Web2 to make Web3 even work at all. And so in my view, my goal of this project is to make it so that we could create a framework that anybody else can utilize it, no matter what chain or project you're working on, arbitrarily, can be anything. And anybody can fully decentralize every component and part of the stack of any kind of application, whether it be an NFT or a protocol or app, whatever it is. Everything can be fully decentralized. Everything can be fully on a Web3 infrastructure and not require any points of centralization to kind of like either spy on or censor. As you've seen recently, like MetaMask was collecting IP addresses and Infura was saying, and they blocked things Tornado Cash from being able to utilize, which is kind of bullshit. And so that's part of the goal of this entire thing. And so I did a live stream interview from CryptoCito on his podcast. And it'll be live on YouTube, I'm sure at some point, if not already now. But that's going to be a project I'll be working on in the future.
So basically, like front ends or wallets would probably be like a main like use case for this, right? So then they could like remove their reliance on stuff like Infura. Is that like the key?
Correct. Like Infura to me, Infura is the first kind of phase. Phase one is the Infura, right? The Infura gives you the ability to interact with the blockchain itself, and interact, like either read some data from a contract or write some data to a contract or whatever it might be. And that's the first kind of pillar that needs to be kind of built in. And we need to destroy the Infuras of the world, the optimistic Infuras that are inherently problematic from my perspective. And that's the first part. The second part, really interested in doing it, I've come up with an interesting design to accomplish it, is to fully decentralize the UIs themselves as well. So you're not going to some website or some domain that either phished or be shut off by ICANN or something like this, but also the who's hosting that website, how that site is being hosted is going to be done in a decentralized way. And so like something like a THORSwap, theoretically, if they want, they don't have to do this, of course, but if they want to, they could. Is you could like remove web hosting entirely, like just get rid of your AWS account almost entirely in terms of using the software, using the THORSwap UI, and get rid of your Thor nodes, get rid of your Midgards, get rid of all those things. Just hit the delete button, right, and kill those things off so that you're not providing that service for your own community. Instead, anybody can be a provider of that service for your community, and they can do that and get paid to do so. And I think it just shifts everything. Now THORSwap can be completely run in a way that can never be turned off by anybody, and that includes THORSwap itself.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it definitely seems like a natural progression and something the space needs. If you're truly going to claim decentralization, you need to remove every centralized piece of the stack. So pretty excited to see.
You have to get fully in the Web3 space. Like we just saw, like this literally happened like a week before SBF, went down to the shitter. He was talking about creating laws in the United States that would KYC the front ends. So he can't really KYC the back ends of the smart contracts himself, because how the fuck are you going to accomplish that? It's like nearly impossible. So now we're going to go after the UIs, because that's the point of centralization, right? And so then we're going to like, okay, THORSwap, like you're a UI, so you're going to need to start KYC all your users. Like that would be a fucking disaster if you ask me. So we need to get ahead of government in their interest to KYC front end THORSwap and tell the government to lick my left nut and get the fuck out of here.
Just the left one.
Just the left one, not the right one.
That'd be too far. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense then. It's great to see. And yeah, I know like these are definitely things that THORSwap is thinking about. And I think we'll see a lot of strides as far as like front end moving towards decentralization. Kind of like, following his lead in a lot of ways. THORChain is such a great example of like an actually decentralized project. So, THORSwap has a good Thor dad to look up to as far as the decentralization path. But yeah, some of these things with actually front ends and hosting, and it's sort of a different problem in some regard. So
it's very much a different problem, and also a very difficult problem to solve, which is why I want to create this like easy to use framework that you can just jump on the back of in a sense and say like, yeah, this is all we got to do. Great, done, finished.
Very cool.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for Archeo. You gave me an explainer at East Denver, and especially just from the perspective of like, I mean, it relates to THORChain in a lot of ways, because Thor nodes can start selling their chain daemon data. Like if you're a Thor node operator, you can basically have a second revenue stream by selling your Ethereum data or whatnot. You could sell it to Shapeshift, who's willing to pay some kind of provider to run that, or whoever's using Archeo data. It just sounds like a very useful product that, I mean, it is a very useful product, which is why I'm sure it'll be successful and people will be using it. But Chad always is the champion of decentralization, so let's fucking go.
I have a pet peeve with the industry in general around like people building projects or whatever that are just geared around like trying to make people rich with some sort of like half-assed credit system or something half-baked. What I wish people would do more in the industry is actually solve problems. Actually find something we can solve that uniquely blockchain or this kind of technological stack can uniquely offer, and actually solve real world problems. And I think I wish we had people in the space that had that mentality rather than let's build something that causes the number to go up as fast as possible.
I wish I could just see like your like idea note. Like I'm sure you've got a note that just has like 100 different ideas on it. Would love to see that.
I do have something with a bunch of I do have something like that, and not one of them is about number go up. It's all about here's a problem in the world, here's how we can solve it from a practical perspective, and this is why blockchain in general is the solution for this particular problem.
Totally, yeah. You definitely think, you can tell just from afar, like you think of these things from first principles and like actually solving problems. I'm curious, is working on something like Archeo almost like, is it simple for you? Because like on THORChain, you're dealing with like, actually controlling like huge amounts of funds and assets and security. Whereas I guess like Archeo doesn't really have that problem to tackle, right? So is it almost like simple for your big brain?
Yeah, it actually is very simple. So THORChain is very, very complex. Took years of research and coding for myself and others. It was just, like, in my opinion, and I mean this in a literal sense, it's one of the most complicated, difficult problems to solve in the entire crypto space, especially in the DeFi space specifically. But like, it's extraordinarily difficult. Took a lot of years to design and build this thing. To this day, nobody else has come up with a different idea or a different approach to doing what it is that this network does. They're all just forking either THORChain, like my forking our white paper, like Chain Flip is doing. Like, it's a very hard problem to solve, and we spent the time to do so. In Archeo's case, though, I came up with the design, the architecture relatively quickly. The first idea literally did in a weekend. It wasn't even that hard to crack. And then there was obviously some changes and improvements made over like a few weeks or whatever. But like, at a whole, it was done pretty quickly. And then the actual code itself, like build the protocol and build all these things, that literally took me exactly 30 days to build the entire thing. And so itself is largely already done. There's some testing and validation, bug fixes, I'm sure, but like we're basically ready from a code perspective pretty much now. So like it's definitely a lot easier, a lot faster to build, a lot less at risk. So you don't have to worry about other chains or like, locking up people's funds in the same way that we think about things with THORChain. So yeah, it's so much easier, so much quicker. So I actually expect this project to be relatively fast for me in terms of like the amount I'm going to spend and building and whatever. That should be like only be like a year, maybe a year and a half or so before I move on to another project and build something else that I feel like needs to be solved.
Love it. Well, we need more Chads in the world. That's awesome to hear, though. Yeah, definitely seems like a much needed project, and glad you're building it, and whatever else is next sounds really interesting too. Cool. So yeah, any I guess we're probably ready to wrap up now then.
Yeah, I just one last thing, I guess. I just got word from DeFi Spot. I believe they're running a $10,000 trading competition on their front ends with. Actually, I don't really know many details. I just pinned it to the top here, so I'm just the messenger on this one. So DeFi Spot, it looks like they're running some kind of $10,000 trading competition on it. So it looks like if you use their front end, then you can get some kind of share of this prize pool. Click on the link and find out some of the details. I'm just learning about this now, so if you want to check it out, then check it out. Just retweeted it and pinned it to the top of this space. So shout outs to DeFi Spot for putting some kind of trading competition together. Hopefully, I'm curious to see like if this type of stuff actually works in incentivizing volume and really moves the needle with users and anything like that. But I guess that's to be determined. But if you're interested in something like that, then definitely check it out. And I think that's the last thing I have for today. So thanks everyone for coming on, and we could meet again soon.
By the way, I'm sorry, one last thing, per I forgot to mention. There's going to be an airdrop for the token at some point to the future. And if you are a rune holder, you are an LP, if you're a node operator on THORChain, you are already part of the drop. So if you're a THORChain, community member and you would like to get involved with Archeo, it sounds like a good, interesting idea that you want to get some free tokens dropped on you. Keep an eye out. Follow the Archeo Network Twitter account. There's a Discord opening up pretty soon to join, and you can get involved if you want to.
For savers too, I believe, right? Except for UTXO chains, I think.
Yeah, I forget the exact specifics. This is largely the Shapeshift putting together the actual airdrop details and configuration of all those things. But yeah, I think savers is being included as well, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a doc that's already, I think it's already being publicly floated around that people can get the details of like how many tokens being dropped and where they're being dropped to and how do you participate, how do you get them, blah, 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 all that stuff.
Cool. Thanks, Chad. And thank you, Chad, for coming on. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this space. Yeah, I guess we'll be on next Friday or whenever else. We'll keep. I said this at the beginning, but we'll keep trying doing these as often as possible. Trying for weekly, and then if we don't make that, then we'll just push it off to the next week. But we're gonna keep on the grind. All right. Peace, everybody.
See you, Chad.
Chad.